Welcome everyone to the governing board meeting of the Cabrillo Unified School District. The governing board met in closed session from 6 to 7:04 p.m. and took the following action. Regarding pending office administration hearing litigation, the governing board voted 5-0 to approve settlement agreement regarding student. And that moves us on to our regular meeting. Welcome everyone, glad to have you here. Pledge of Allegiance, we have someone from the high school, Margarita Vasquez, has agreed to lead us. Everyone stand, face the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Brings us to item 7, adoption of agenda as presented. Motion to approve, second?
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved 5-0. Brings us to item 8, student staff community recognition. Elizabeth?
For our first recognition this evening, I'm actually going to invite teacher Javier Gutierrez from the high school to come up and do the introductions, and congratulations.
Welcome.
Thank you. Cool. Well, we have most of the members that participated in the San Mateo County Fair this last summer, and then a lot of their classmates here to support them and cheer really loud when it's time. So I'll just call I'll call everybody that participated in the San Mateo County Fair. And some of them actually did multiple animals, or we have a couple that had multiple animals, multiple species, and even like garden projects or jammed in the different food competitions that they have there. So I'll start with Chloe Hall had some chickens. She's not here, but Joey Alves is here. Joe Alves and his brother Jim Alves. And you guys are gonna stay up here so we can take a picture. Joe, Jimmy, Kevin Burns. Nice wait up here, Kevin. Thank you. Heather, Sarah, they aren't here, but Jenna Baxter is. Jenna and Ashley Oots. It's going to take her a little longer to come up here. But Jenna and Ashley always point out are the ones that you guys might find up in El Granada walking their lambs along the coastal trail. And they also did a garden for the first time and did an awesome job and got lots of prizes on the garden, as well as showing the chickens that we raise behind the classroom. So if you guys are ever up at the high school, go behind K6 there on the outside, you'll see the chicken coop, and they've been managing that chicken project. And we had the Best in Show female. And so you can find her at the high school. That's the chicken, not the Jake isn't here. Amy Simonek. Some of these students graduated already, but Cheyenne. Wade Watkins had the reserve grand champion heifer. Is Jacob here? Okay. So we have a lot of supporters, and I'll have to take these back to school. Natasha Laba, she participated in the horse project, so they compete. We partner with Ember Ridge. She works on her own ranch with the horses a lot, and then we have a partnership with Ember Ridge up in Moss Beach that allows our students to practice up there. And this year they had the contest at the at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, but it was part of the San Mateo County Fair, so that was pretty cool. And I think Crystalline and Veronica are not here. So these are the students that are here, and I'll take a bunch back with me. And thank you guys for taking the time to recognize the hard work of these students.
Thank you, Javier and students. I'm always so proud of our high school that it's one of the only that has our FFA.
And last comment I wanted to make is all the supporters in the audience, that's what makes Half Moon Bay the community that it is.
Thank you. Okay, Tony?
Yes, the governing board recognizes Mr. James Ward as the appointed principal of Alvin Hatch Elementary School. Mr. Ward served as interim principal for several months last year at Hatch. He was introduced to the staff and the parent community at the back-to-school night on September 4th, 2013. Mr. Ward received a very warm welcome from staff and from the community. Mr. Ward earned his Bachelor of Science degree in English from the College of Oneida State University in New York. He also earned a Master's of Arts degree in Education from San Francisco State University. Mr. Ward holds a single subject teaching credential in English, a multiple subject teaching credential, and a cross-cultural language and academic development credential, as well as the administrative services credential. Mr. Ward joined the Cabrillo Unified School District in 1999 and has taught English and drama at Cunha Intermediate School. He also has directed and coordinated the annual musical at Half Moon Bay High. Mr. Ward, please come up.
Thank you. If you can tell by the look on my face, I had no idea that I would be asked to speak tonight. But I just want to thank the school board and the community and Dr. Rorick and all the other site administrators and office administrators for the support and kindness and warm welcome that everyone has given me. This is a very welcoming, supportive, caring community. I agree with Dr. Shuck that everyone is just wonderful, parents, students. I went to one classroom of a little girl, and I was explaining to all the students that first day, and she just looked at me and she said, as first grader, and she said, "I love you, Mr. Ward." And this little girl I'd kind of connected with last year, and it was just one of those. These are the moments in an elementary school that are just so wonderful. So again, thank you, and I really appreciate all the support and kindness and good wishes. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Brings us to item 9, comments from the public related to items not on this agenda. And just to clarify that when we get comments related to items that are not on the agenda, the board is not allowed to deliberate or take any action or discuss those items per California Sunshine Act laws. Anything that's discussed in a meeting has to be agendized prior to it so that everybody has notice that those things are going to be discussed. But we have someone here, Dana called Cadwalder Hayden.
Yes.
Okay, please come. Thank you.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Dana Cadwalder. Hi, Mr. Corey. I understand 3 minutes, no comments back, so I'll be very quick and concise. I did provide Patty copies of what I'm discussing today, which goes into more detail just because of the time allotted. But I wanted to share 2 issues on a school level and an elementary level. Kind of what Mr. Ward was commenting earlier about the little kids. They're so sweet and so innocent. And I have a son who was 5 when he started at Kings Mountain Elementary School. He turned 6 in November, and it seems like from the get-go, from trying to work with Kings Mountain, there was always some issues. And I'll start with safety at first, which really started the first quarter of 2013. We sent a letter to the school indicating that we were concerned about the students being watched appropriately because his glasses had been broken 4 times by students. And in fact, the 3rd time, because the school knows the teachers that we're not happy about it, it's very expensive to replace frames and lenses. The 3rd time, they just told him to put the glasses in his backpack, and he says, "Well, call my dad, he'll come up with an extra pair," and they said no. So that was kind of a huge red flag. So he has a plus +9 vision. So as you can imagine, throughout the day, it's pretty much not seeing throughout the whole entire day. In addition to that, safety, when you open up the door, and this is really for all students when you think about it, when you open up the door to the kindergarten room, there's about, this is approximate, about a 4-foot landing before it starts to slope down at about a 40% angle. And again, it's just an approximate. So when you have little kids that are 5 and 6 years old, when they hear the bell ring running up to the class or running down that slope, and their bodies are developing, it's not an easy trek. So one day, after we had already sent a letter of concern about safety, like who's really watching these kids, the bell rang, my son was running up the hill, another kid, innocently enough, kicked the ball. As he was running, his foot hit the ball. He fell, hit his head in the cement. So a couple of things on that in terms of safety, that's one, because he ended up with a concussion. The things that needs to be addressed with the board for future safety for kids is, both my husband and I work. By the time they actually reached us, it was well into an hour. By the time we were able to get there, because of the distance, it was an additional 45 minutes, so approximately 2 hours since the accident. He cut his head open, was bleeding, even though they still put a butterfly bandage, still bleeding profusely. He lost vision when he fell. And he was complaining that his stomach's hurting and his eyes were completely dilated. By the time I got there with him, got him into the car, he's vomiting, he's in and out of consciousness. I take him to Stanford, and they admit him immediately for a trauma level 3. So my question is why do you let a student sit there for 2 hours when they fell, they couldn't see, and he's bleeding profusely, and he's saying his stomach hurts and the eyes are dilated and they can't get a hold of their parents? So they immediately took him in and did a CAT scan immediately because they're like, is there blood in the brain? Is there swelling? I mean, you know, with the CAT scan, doesn't matter what it is, it can be hours before you get in, even if you're in the emergency room. I mean, they had him in within 10 minutes getting a CAT scan, so they didn't know exactly where his status was. So I think that's something that the school board needs to be aware of for future safety for kids, because it was a really innocent act. No one did it maliciously. It is what it is, but nonetheless, that could be, you know, there's going to be some severe consequences if there was really blood on the brain and he was sitting there for hours. So that we're not really thrilled with. Another thing which we had to bring into in terms of the kids being watched is, you know, there was a group of kids that were planning to make bombs. And keep in mind, these kids are 5 and 6. They don't know what they're doing or really talking about or playing. They're innocent. And I have no ill will. But these kids were making bombs, a couple of kids, out of sand, paper towels, mud, sea salt. They're doing it behind the shed. But their goal, which is alarming, is to put it in the kids' backpack to blow up the other kids in their homes in the school. And as soon as I was talking to my son that day about that type of play, that's inappropriate at all levels. It must stop immediately. And the school is very responsive. I can't say that it was not. It was extremely responsive, but the exact same thing happened the next day. So it goes back to who's watching these kids in the playground. I have a son with glasses that are broken multiple times, bite marks. We wrote a letter and email, which we have, that we're concerned about his safety. He gets a concussion. He sits there for 2 hours, and then there's kids making bombs to blow up other kids in the school. So I'm like, even though Kings Mountain is very small, maybe the resources aren't, maybe they need more resources to help. I don't know the answer, and you know, I'm not privileged to that, nor do I want to be. It's something that's a concern, and these are prime examples that have been documented. You'll see it in the emails that I sent. And it's not just hearsay or this is how I feel. These are true examples. The concussion sitting for 2 hours is probably the most devastating, just for the consequences to the board to have a student sit there in that type of condition for that long. So that's safety. That's one issue. So my last minute and a half or minute, I'll be quick. And you, again, please review to the emails because it'll provide more details, and that talks about academics. From the get-go from the school, my son did speech therapy. He was allotted twice a week for speech. And from the get-go, and I can't really explain it. There's no explanation. From the get-go, I've always had pushback from the teacher about what he can't do. It was always sitting down about, well, this is what we get measured on, this is what we get paid on. These are the core objectives that you have to hit. Doesn't matter that he does really well at sight words, he has to do phonics. It doesn't matter he does well in this, he has to do this. And you understand, you know, so we tried to work in that area, and you'll see in the details that even at one point she's telling us halfway through the year that, yeah, well, she'll pass him through kindergarten, but she would never pass him through first grade. And you're seeing that that's like a whole year of development in a little child, so how can you sit there and think about that? And, you know, as she was giving us examples, and a couple of examples you'll see, one is like, oh, he doesn't know nursery rhymes. He can't recite a nursery rhyme. He doesn't know his shapes. He doesn't know his letters. And, you know, so I'm sitting there absorbing all this, and I'm like, huh. And I challenged her. And I went home, and I'm taking off his shoes. I'm like, oh, Jack and Jill went up the hill. He took off and did it. I'm like, oh, you know that one. Because I'm thinking, well, you know what? I never did nursery rhymes with him, so I'm at fault. I should work on that. You know, let me start off with it. And that's probably the only one I really know, to be honest with you. But the point is, and then I sat down, I made my own letters, and I cut them out, and I'm like, okay, separate the lowercase, uppercase, you know, tell me what the letters are. He did all of them with the exception of 4. And so you're like, all of this stuff that I just sat there and listened to about what a horrible child that can't keep up, and she has no idea what to do. She kept saying that so much that it's in writing to an email to the school that I'm tired of hearing a teacher that they don't know what to do. When I go home and that night, he does it. And then and the one thing that we did concede on that she was right was the sphere and the cube. He did not know the difference between a sphere and a cube. I'm like, okay, so I showed him a sphere and I showed him a cube, talked to him about 5-10 minutes of it with all the shapes. Back again, he repeated what it was. In the morning, he repeated what it was. And so, you know, I challenged the school in writing all these issues that kept being brought up that we just didn't see. And I don't want to speak on someone else's behalf, but I don't think his speech teacher saw either. I'm not sure what type of level she got involved with behind the doors because that's not the goal. The goal is to make sure the child succeeds. It kind of goes to the motto that's on the wall. But it seems like no matter what type of feedback we were getting, it never was consistent with what we were seeing. And then I would always come back and like, what's going on in the classroom? Because, you know, I'm not there. I'm just not there. So I don't know where the disconnect is, or, you know, there's a part of me that thinks, you know, does Kings Mountain cherry pick their kids in, and do they intently cherry pick their kids out? Because they've got great API scores, so I always thought the school was like this phenomenal school, and the skill set of what I experienced was just not there. And at age 5 and 6, in my opinion, unless the child is deemed otherwise, it's the skill set of the teacher that brings out the skill of the child at that age. Because they're so inquisitive and so innocent, you can't just keep pointing your finger at a kid. And is my son perfect? No. And is he the brightest kid in the class? No. Am I the one that's saying, oh, he can do this math and he can read this and do that? No. But can he learn? Yes. Does he work with you? Yes. And so I challenged the school board too. I said, listen, if you think he's at this type of level, then get him tested. Let's get him the resources. What do we need to do? 10 days later, because you know the time once you put in official writing, no. The school board seeing no reasons to test him. They took him to a side and they quietly tested him. He passed all objectives. So how can you have a conversation throughout the school year on that day, and then 10 days later the board's like, nope, we're not testing him. He's done. He's perfect. He passed all his objectives. And the last piece of the paper you'll see at the end of the year assessment, because of course we just always had these conflicts throughout the year, he passed at 93%. The two things that he failed at is he reads 23 words a minute versus 40. But you would all have to agree, kids don't learn, kids study. Can you learn first grade sometimes? And the second thing is writing, you know, a sentence in a story. Okay, we can work with him on that. And he does need work in that area. But with all of the trials and tribulations throughout the year on a kindergarten level, we just found our son not wanting to go to school, angry about school, not feeling accepted at school, singled out at school, and it just became at a kindergarten level. I mean, kids should be happy to go to school. They're excited to go to school. They want to learn. They want to share what they can do. Instead, he always felt like he was not equipped to be ranked or whatever the words are. I don't know what the words are. So there are a lot of red flags, And, you know, I can take some accountability in terms of, is he perfect? No, but he's a normal kid. You have to tell him no 10 times? Absolutely. And does he always listen? No, he doesn't. Does he get in trouble? Absolutely. But is he a good kid? Yeah, he's a good kid. So, you know, the environment of the academic level, I can't answer to that. But it's clear if you read my minutes that I shared with you today, and I hope it's reflected in the minutes, there's something going on. I don't have the answer. I'm not privileged to that. But again, to follow the motto on the wall, I'm accountable as a citizen and as a community member to share my experience and examples, things in writing. So it's just not what I feel or I didn't like this, or these are solid examples, and solid examples of how we tried to work with the system. And at one point I had to tell a teacher, listen, I am really tired of hearing that you don't know what to do because you're in charge of the classroom. And if the school will not test him for special needs or issues, you're in charge of the classroom. This is your accountability. And repeatedly she would say she didn't know what to do. And I said, you know, I expect that from someone that's young and right out of college because they're ramping up their skill level. I expect that. But not when you're at a plateau. And if you can't do it, then find out where you can go to do it and what can we do together. Because the one thing she probably has never encountered is we are engaged parents. We want his success. We want to work with the school system. We respect the school system. We come from the background of my mother taught for the school of the deaf. My grandmother taught challenging students. We've got teachers that are, you know, professors at colleges, to grade levels. I mean, we have a true respect for the academic public school system. We vote for all the bond measures. When I went up to the school, they liked funding. I wrote them a check for funds, you know, gave up weekends to help clean up the school. I mean, we understand that there are constraints and there's issues, and you do the best you can. But we tried to work throughout the year, and there's just absolutely no success. So that's it. I think my 3 minutes is up.
Well, thank you very much.
I did it well, but I hope you take a moment and really take a look at the emails and the issues and take them to heart. And if any one of you have questions or concerns where you want a more one-on-one meeting or clarification, I'd be more than happy to supply that. There's more emails and documentations. I just highlighted the ones that I thought that really hit the points for today.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you
you
very much.
coming.
Have a good evening.
Okay, take care. That brings us to item 10, representative reports. CUTA. Tom here? Nope. Stig here for CSEA? No.
Technical difficulties.
Good to see you again. Good evening.
Good evening.
First, I would like to welcome our new Director of Physical Service and Director of Special Ed, Jim, to his new position. think it seems to get good people in here. It's nice. I want to acknowledge all the support staff who have worked all summer to get the school ready. It's been a little lonely without the kids in the classroom and no teachers there either. So, but it has been a very hectic year, and the technology we have now, we are 4 people plus my boss Anne, who have tried to get everything up and running here. It's been an interesting year and a lot of new stuff out there. I just want to say that CSA also are hoping that the district continue to work to rehire back some of the positions. We still are a lot of people out there who work 4 hours, 6 hours. Would be nice to see some of the hours getting back, so people can have a decent living and decent health care to work. And they do a great work here in the district, and see so everyone have a clean classroom, staff working, and see so everything runs smoothly in the district. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Stig. That brings us to item 11, reports, information, and presentations. 11A. Are you introducing this, Tony, or? We're going to receive a request for a letter of support by the Granada Sanitary District to convert to the Granada Community Services District. Are you heading that up, or just go ahead with Chuck? Okay, welcome to Chuck Duffy.
Hi. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
My name is Chuck Duffy. I'm the manager of the Granada Sanitary District. I want to thank you, board, for hearing our item today. We're proposing to reorganize into a community service district to provide parks and recreation powers. And there's been a long acknowledged need for additional parks and recreation powers on the coast side. To date, it's been pretty much the city of San Diego. I'm giving away my southern roots here. The city of Half Moon Bay has been providing parks and recreation services for the entire coast side, and the county is not in the business of providing regional or local parks and recreation services. So what my board would like to do is to reorganize into a community services district, provide these services. We are the only governmental entity available to provide these services at this point in time. And our goal is to take our existing property tax revenues, which we currently receive and use to subsidize the sewer service rates, if you will, and take a portion of that and use that to provide these parks and rec services. And we're going to go in front of the Local Agency Information Commission to ask the commission to approve our proposal and eventually send it to a vote of the people, which is, where it belongs, I think. That's about all I've got. I'm more here to answer questions because I know there's a lot of questions. I've been doing a lot of community outreach. I've met with the Half Moon Bay Parks and Recs Commission. I've met with the Midcoast Community Council. I was actually there the day after the Moss Beach Park was sold, which was an interesting meeting. So there were about 60 people there where there's usually about 5. So, that turned out to be interesting. I actually opened up my remarks with, don't let what happened to Moss Beach Park happen here. So I'd be glad to field some questions and whatnot from your board.
And just to clarify for the board, this is a report and information. We can ask them questions. We're not going to actually deliberate on any action. We'll kind of decide then if we want to bring it in at a future time to actually look at a letter of approval. So.
Okay.
Are there any specific goals that you can share if in fact it were to come to pass that you're able to reorganize specific sites or activities or
Yeah, we get that question a lot.
Sure.
Part of the problem, it's the chicken and the egg.
Of course, yeah.
We've got to get the parks and recreation powers before we can, develop projects and whatnot. That being said, what we do has a list of suggested projects. The Burnham Strip comes to mind. The Broad Avenues in El Granada comes to mind. We've talked with other districts about partnering with them. I actually had a meeting prior to Tony coming on board with Rob Gaskill, saying, we could look at things like that. Quarry Park. So we've listed all these in our proposal. It's just, again, we can just list these ideas.
Sure.
It's going to be future board's decision to what direction they want to go.
Thank
Any further questions, or?
I have one. Just a point of clarification. Exhibit A shows the boundaries of your district. And then on page 9 of your document, it mentions both Fairlawn and El Dorado School, but Fairlawn's not in that district. So the reason for mentioning school recreational resource area, or schools potentially would be served by this district, correct? Or am I misunderstanding?
Well, and again, I'll be lying my southern roots here. One of my directors should have caught that, because I don't even know where Fairlawn School is. So that's in there by accident then.
Yeah, your northern boundary is at the airport level, and Fairlawn is 6 miles north of that.
Okay, yeah, then
If
that's
that makes
just a mistake. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what, I was trying to understand whether your proposed jurisdiction would be greater than the boundaries you show in that, or not.
No, it is the boundaries there, that's just
Thank you
an
for
error.
clarifying that.
And then our overriding goal, aside from that error, is to, again, get this in front of LAFCO, get it in front of the voters. We provide the funding source, we've got the governmental structure in place, so that's kind of what we're going for.
So where are you at in the process? When are you going before LAFCO? Do you yet have a date for going in front of the voters?
We do have a date, and it's a date that keeps moving a little bit, but we are now at the November LAFCO meeting. So that's our goal, is to get to the November LAFCO meeting, have the commission hopefully bless the project, then LAFCO would go and set a date for the election. We're tentatively looking at June 2014, which I know we've talked about in the past, but that's up to LAFCO's discretion to set that date, so.
Okay. Any further questions, or?
How do you, I mean, looking just in a broad strategic plan, can you give an example of how you would partner with our school district? Or how, you mentioned working with school representatives to provide community services. Give us an example of what that might look like.
I think in things like playing field maintenance, additional playing fields, again, I haven't looked deeply into this, and, it'd be more of a partnership where you could come to us with identified needs, and we could start talking about how we could provide them. So that's my big overview, and that's the most simplistic one, obviously, because it's staring in front of us. I don't know in this community, but every community I've ever been in, there's always a lack of playing fields, and people are scrambling for soccer fields and ball fields and things like that. So. And, we've got the funding source once again, which people are always scrambling for, so.
Is a passive park a park where you would have benches and maybe some playground instruments? Is that what's meant by the term
Yeah.
passive park?
Yeah, exactly what's meant by it, yeah. And there's been numerous studies, I don't know how up-to-date you all are with this, the county did a task force report in 2002. I've got a stack of them this high, and that's why we finally stopped saying, do we need parks? It's obviously we do need more parks and recreation. The question is, how is it going to be delivered, and what's the best entity to do it?
Great. Any further questions or clarifications on that? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Chuck. for
Thank you very
coming. We
much.
appreciate it. That brings us to item 11B, receive and review annual report on accountability progress reporting. Elizabeth?
I think we would fire up our computer.
Oh, okay. Do I need to move?
Behind you on the screen.
Point of indicating Yeah. So this would mention.
But it would potentially a lot of our basic people.
So tonight, I'm presenting our annual accountability progress report about results on the standardized testing and how the state and the federal government look at progress of schools in California. And before I do that, I just wanted to show you the complexities of the information that we're looking at. This is the information packet on how to understand the API results. This is the information packet on how to understand the AYP results. And just as a sample, this is the kind of data I pull off of DataQuest at the state of California to be able to give this kind of a report, to be able to summarize it for you. So in introducing it that way, my purpose in doing so is to be able to show you that there are different components of this report and on the information that's used and calculated in giving information about how schools in California are progressing. There are state accountability reporting procedures, which include our academic performance index. And we get a base report, and that one came out in June, last June, for the prior year. And then we get a growth report that just came out this past August. And you'll notice that it's color-coded. I tried to be able to distinguish for you in the report as we go through which accountability system we're looking at. The federal accountability from No Child Left Behind include the adequate yearly progress goals. And the annual progress report came out in August. Early August, it was released to school districts to look for any errors or changes that might need to be made. And the program improvement report was scheduled to come out. The information recently came out about 3 weeks ago to the public. For those in the audience, I apologize if that's too small for you to read, but this indicates for you all of the tests that are calculated into the API, the Academic Performance Index. It's a growth model, and it is based on a scale of 1 to 1,000 or 100 to 1,000. The state goal for all schools is to reach 800, and you will see that the majority of our schools are there or have exceeded the 800 mark. But I wanted to point out something tonight that I haven't necessarily pointed out in the past, that in the API and the AYP, both used in this calculation, they're not looking at the same types of data. In the API, we're looking at the students that took the CST tests, the California Standards tests, in grades 2 through 11. On the AYP, it will be grades 2 through 8, and you will notice a difference in the total number of students when you're looking at the reports and who was reported, how many students. And a question came up even in just reviewing the information, why are we looking at different numbers? Because not all students are calculated in each of the numbers in how it's calculated. So in the base program report, what we're looking at is the number of students in our school district, and Pilarcitos does not get an API because of the size of the school. It's a small school. And we look at the base, what we started with last year, what we finished for our API, and as I mentioned, you'll notice that we're very close, if not exceeding 800 at all of the schools in our school district. And this number changed over the summer. I was talking with Jim Ward the other day, and he said to me, how did that happen? And how did we not even get to celebrate being at 800 because the number changed over the summer? And that's true. The numbers do change as the state recalculates information based on different criteria. Something that we haven't talked about a lot in the past is the statewide ranking and the similar schools ranking. And for the statewide ranking, what is done is that the school is compared to all other schools at the same grade level out of a category of a 1 to 10 rubric. So we're looking at wanting our schools to be in the 10 range like Kings Mountain, the 7 ranges that Cunha and Half Moon Bay High School are in. The similar schools ranking is a little bit different. It's an individual school ranking, and it's comparing schools that have comparable factors, characteristics in the school. And again, it's a 1 to 10 ranking in every group of 100 schools, so that you're ranked within that decibel and deciding if you're a 1 to 10. Again, 10 would be the number that we would be looking for in our similar schools ranking. But I would like to point out that, for example, when I said that it's similar characteristics, English language learners is one of those components. And for Cabrillo, we know that a majority, if not all of our English language learners are Spanish speaking. Across the hill, the English language learners could be Asian, or they could be from multiple languages, and they're all considered English language learners. So the background of the students is not necessarily calculated, but rather their language proficiency. Each school then is given a growth target. Yes?
But so you're saying that, I understand the last comment you made, but in your view, under the similar ranks, are the schools being compared to schools that have the same challenges, demographics?
So I think
what are the similarities that tie them together? That's confidence in that ranking or lack thereof is what allows us to.
So the state uses ethnicity, socioeconomic levels of families, parent education levels, and I think that the clearest way to describe to you my answer, and if I think it's equitable, is there is no school in our county that's similar to us in this ranking. The schools that they're ranking us with are in other counties in Southern California or in other parts of the state. None in our own county. So I would be looking for a school that would be similar in nature to Hatch or whichever of our schools based on those characteristics, and I would be looking for, like I said, the English language learners that are migrant children of low-income families.
Are you saying you're challenged by the fact that it compares to a Southern California school district that looks like ours versus one that's
I think that
local?
the factors can be different. The English learner status, I worked in San Francisco Unified School District, and the English learners are Chinese bilingual students, and they are English language learners. So that's the same ranking as a Cabrillo English learner that's a Spanish speaker from a migrant family.
Okay. More to come.
And so each of our schools receives a growth target. If they have not made their growth to the 900 or the 800, you'll notice that the schools that have hit the 800 are not given growth targets because they've already met the target. And then their annual target, they're showing if they raised their, for example, if Hatch went from 789 up 5 API points, that they would be at 794. That's the base report that we get first. This is the description for information about how the statewide ranking, and again it says that they are background characteristics posing comparable educational challenges and opportunities. I do want to comment that I think it's important we keep track of those numbers. I'm not saying to disregard them. I just want us to be careful to look at what the characteristics are and how they relate to one another. So the growth report that we get at the end of the school year that shows whether or not we made the academic performance index growth that was expected for us actually starts off with the new API calculation, the base that we looked at on the previous page, the target that had been expected for that school, whether or not they made the growth. And what you will notice is that most of our schools some of our schools had made the growth that was expected of them, and some of our schools had dramatic losses that we did not expect to see in this growth report. The next column shows whether or not they met their school-wide growth target, which would be for all students across the school, and then individual subgroups of students, English language learners, students with disabilities, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and any other ethnic groups that are significant subgroups in the school district. And then the last column is, did they meet these two growth targets that they were required to achieve? Important to look at the data for our significant subgroups, and there is nothing here that I would be coming to celebrate with you except for the fact that our students with disability, for these many years we have not been seeing make progress, made a tremendous growth last year in our school district, and you will see it again in other reports that we have, that the students have made a tremendous growth, and I would like to attribute the co-teaching that's begun in our school district and other activities that we have where we are focusing on finding ways to involve our students with disabilities more aligned in our school district. So we switched to the adequate yearly progress, and again I wanted to point out that you're looking at different data and I don't know that the public realizes this when we're looking at the scores, that it is different sets of data that are being used. For example, the Casey exam that's given at the high school, on this particular component we're looking only at the 10th graders. On API they're looking at the 10th graders and any 11th or 12th grader that retook the test during the school year. There are expectations, and this is the goal of No Child Left Behind that we've heard before, where students need to get to 100%. All students need to be at 100% proficient by 2014. Excuse me. The participation rate for 95%, this school district has met that rate in every year except one where we had a miscalculation on a group of students with disability that we miscoded. But for participation, we have met and exceeded the 95% participation rate. You can see that there are different criteria whether or not you're an elementary school, a middle school, or elementary school districts, high schools and high school districts, or in our particular case, a unified school district, a high school district, or a county office of education. For the percent proficient in English language arts, the target for last school year varied based on what type of a district you were in. For our school district, we were looking for an 89% proficiency rate for students in language arts, and in mathematics, we were looking for 89.1% proficient. For API, we were looking for 770 or a growth of 1 point, and all of the schools in Cabrillo met this particular criteria, and I'll show you that again later because it's part of the summary report. For the graduation report, there are 3 different ways of looking at graduation. The first could be that a district school would be asked to achieve a 90% graduation rate. The second is that they're given a fixed growth target based on their past history, or third, that they're given a variable growth target based on the components and circumstances of the school. Looking at the adequate yearly progress results for Cabrillo, I would like to comment that results are down across the state of California, and there has been considerable conversation as to what led to that. A lot of the conversation has been around the transition to Common Core and the continued reductions at the schools for services for students. But the San Mateo County stays above the state, as a whole county stays above the state in results for adequate yearly progress. Cabrillo doesn't stay above the state, which is at 56.4 in English language arts as a school district, but we do exceed the state in mathematics. So we're looking at the number of students that participated in this calculation, and I would like to point out this number because last year, or year before, when Allison and I were working on the WASC, she said to me, Elizabeth, we have more than 225 students at the high school that take the CSTs each year that we need to calculate, and it's because they're not looking at all of the students that take the CST. They're using the exit exam as their criteria in this case. So they're not even comparing all the same data. They're looking at different data points and putting it all together and calling it a result on English language arts. The number of students that were proficient or above, which is our goal for all students, and then the percent of students that were proficient or above, with the percentage of being 89%, if you remember, we were looking for. On the right-hand column, we're looking at which of the schools met that criteria, the 89%, and you will notice down in the right-hand column, this little SH stands for Safe Harbor. The high school made enough growth that they meet the requirement, even though they're only at 62.7%. The schools, again, I would point out that all of our schools from last year, because I don't have a column to show you the data from last year, but all of our schools went down by 1% or 2%, except for Half Moon Bay High School that went up to 62.7%, which is almost a 5% increase from last year. In mathematics, the county average is 59.5%, the state average is 51.2%, and Cabrillo's average is above that state average, slightly less than the county, but still above the state average in results for mathematics. Again, the number of students that participated, the number that achieved proficiency, the percentage of students that achieved proficiency, and then which of the schools met their target. And in this case, it was Farallon View that grew enough in their percentages that they received approval for meeting the criteria as a safe harbor calculation. Most of the schools went up from last year to this year, including El Granada, Farallon View, Kings Mountain, and the high school, only by a few percentage points. And Hatch and Cunha went down slightly from this year in regards to last year. Looking at the significant subgroups, this chart does show you the comparison between the adequate yearly progress in English language arts this year as compared to the prior year. And you will notice looking at the figures that we did go down in almost every category except looking at the students with disabilities from last school year until this school year. We went up 4.3% difference. Again, attributing that we are making changes and finding ways to support our students with disability, which we've needed to do for a very long time. Looking at the mathematics, most of our subgroups had a gain from prior year to this year, a slight gain, and the greatest gain was between the students with disabilities in mathematics from 27% proficient to 38.6% proficient, and because of that, the subgroup met the goal using that safe harbor calculation because they have continued to increase. For the adequate yearly progress report, they go back and they look at the API that the school received as part of the state growth calculation. And again, to reiterate that the 770 is the minimum requirement or the growth of at least 1 point. So even though, an example, our school dropped some API points this year, we're still above the 770, so we did meet our target in this particular case. We did across all of the schools in the district. The last calculation used in the graduation I mentioned is the graduation rate, and down here you can see the criteria that there can be a standard 90% expectation, a fixed target rate, or a variable target rate, and they are calculated that have for any district or school that has not met the 90% goal. Looking at the school district, we met our 2013 criteria for all of our subgroups. And at Half Moon Bay High School, we met our criteria for all of the subgroups for this year. There's a program improvement report that indicates whether schools that participate receiving Title I funds have been identified as program improvement. And our school district has been in what I call suspended animation for a number of years, as has Hatch and Cunha. They received these years of status about 3 years ago, and the state has not been following through with the program improvement requirements and activities that we've needed to follow. We're called Date Light, which is the lightest system of people monitoring what's happening in our school district, because now that Cabrillo's in program improvement, many other districts in our county and state have all been identified as program improvement. The chart indicates the year that we were. The one school that you will see that changed, that did not make their safe harbor targets, was El Granada. So they've moved from year 1 to year 2. And this gives you the years that the schools were identified for program improvement. And again, the indication of whether or not they made their progress. So the summary report sort of takes all of those components for adequate yearly progress and puts them back together in its final calculation of whether or not the school met or the district met all of the components that are required for adequate yearly progress in language arts, both participation and in percentage proficient, whether it met the API goal, whether it met the graduation rate if it's applicable to the school, and if the school has a status as far as program improvement. Our state superintendent noted that our schools all across the state did dip slightly, and he agrees that it's our shift in thinking. And I meant to say when I opened the report that this could quite possibly be the last time that we share this kind of a report with you. There is still question about whether we will have our CSTs this spring. And if we do have them, we might have one more report like this, but then after that, we are completely changing our system and going to the smarter balanced assessments. Our deputy superintendent at our county office sees that we're in a transitional period and that we have been making slow and steady progress, but we need to continue our fight for all students to achieve proficiency. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions?
I
board
do.
members?
Sure.
Yeah, so
and I'm using a broad brush, and I appreciate some of the things you said about the transitions that may be occurring and so forth, and but directionally, when I see regression, I have concerns, right? I mean, we have a similar set of challenges that we have in our community, and we've talked about some of them here. But as the district works on its strategy, and we, our continued plan for success for these students, I guess as a follow-up, I would like to have a better understanding, and maybe even a separate side conversation about, or a discussion about, really what maybe at each school level, what's happening, because it seems, there are some ups and downs there, but broad brush, I see regression, and that doesn't feel good. And I don't know what my other board members think, but I may not have a full understanding of the issues at hand and so forth, but I need to understand that better.
And I would say, Rob, that for the first time since about 2003, I too am seeing regression, and it's surprising to me with all that's going on in the schools. But I think that it would be important for us to come back and share with you some of the changes that are happening, the addition of intervention teachers at the elementary school, the addition of Math Plus classes and language arts intervention classes at the middle school, the addition of AVID at both the middle school and the high school. And I think it would be valuable for you to hear some of the changes that are taking place.
Can I follow up on that question? I share that concern. What I'm concerned about is it virtual? Is it actual or virtual? Is there a new way of looking at the data? I cannot buy the story that in anticipation of the statewide standards change occurring in the near future, things all backslid because everybody was thinking about that. I mean, that's the implication of what you're saying, and that just seems hard to...
The other thing to remember is that percentage proficient went up again to almost 90%. So when we started, we were at 45%. In 2003, the expectation would be that 45% of the students would be proficient, and we're now up at 89%, almost 90%. So the numbers of students needing to be proficient has increased. So virtual, it is, I'm not implying that we don't need to make changes, Dr. Reamer. The difficulty in moving more students has been a challenge for our school district, as it is for the school districts in San Mateo County and in California, with the high percentage of English language learners that we have, and we need to find the answer to the strategies that will work for the population that we serve.
Have the number of English language learners changed? Did that number grow last year?
No, the number has remained about the same.
Okay. So do you have any other way of measuring the data that you see these tests, you see the raw numbers here, you see the data, and you imply that they're comparing apples to oranges in a lot of comparisons that are being made to generate the API scores and others. So have you looked at the data yourself, and do you believe that it reflects a true decline in the degree of learning over the past year, or is it in other words, if you did your own calculations looking at test scores or other ways of measuring learning, can you say that you definitely agree on that, or you haven't looked at another way, you're just taking what they're telling us and then saying, well, try to put the two things together, they don't jive, but they all show a decline?
So I've said something for years, and I don't mind saying it here this evening. If our students were at 99% proficient across the district, I would absolutely know that we're being assessed appropriately, and it shows what we're accomplishing with our students. And it doesn't show that. That's not what our results say.
I'm concerned that we're, I would imagine that we really are making more progress than is apparent through this data set. The only other comment I would have is, what does it mean to make a 1 point of expected growth of a score that was 770 before or after the one, I can't remember which one, but out of a 1,000-point rating range, to say we expect to grow 1 point in a year? I mean, what is the point of making such a prediction, or setting that bar, that goal? Can you explain that?
It's a very complicated calculation. I would also comment that our state, who has asked us for the last 14 years to follow the pattern of using CST as our model and our goal, has publicly stated that that was a mistake and that we need to be looking at a different way, and that's why we have Common Core standards, and we will be looking at more project-based, authentic learning for students and authentic assessment for students. The expectation changed in the API based on where the numbers of schools were moving, how many schools had gotten to the 800. So they didn't need to move as much when we started coming up from the 500s to the 700s to the 800s.
Elizabeth, have we ever looked at data based on individual students, more tracking? So, because you compare kind of how a school is done and it's one set of students and then they all move up a year, and have we ever done more of an assessment of, okay, these kids are at this level, in the next grade, did more of them end up proficient? Have we ever looked at the data in more of a following way?
So
It seems like
interesting.
that's what teachers do more. They're looking at their own kids throughout the year and into the following year. And that just seems like a more relevant, that everyone's making progress of some sort, whatever level that they're at.
On Tuesday, we had a professional development for the majority of the staff in the district on instructional rounds, the strategy that Dr. Rorick has discussed with you previously. And part of the activity was looking at data for each of the schools and particular grade levels or department levels. So teachers do and have become very accustomed to looking at data across the years for each of their students. The kindergarten teachers were looking at second grade data so that they would know what had happened to the students that had left their classroom and had now become part of the standardized testing system. And they were able to and did see some noticeable changes in the progress of their students that has intrigued them to want to dig further. I can tell you over the past several years, the data conferences that our teachers have been involved in at each of the school sites is really focusing in on exactly what you're saying, that we're looking at each and every individual student and their particular progress at the schools. We have work to do.
And do you,
Particularly why I was asking about the same school aspect. When I see same school, so I think of they're living our same circumstance, budget issues, language issues, staff shortages, all the things that we know are challenges for education. But we're at the bottom of same schools? That is where I start to feel very uncomfortable.
Budget issues are not calculated in the same school's calculation.
Well, I guess we're all, except for certain, you're saying it's in no way part of that calculation. For instance, Palo Alto, which has got a different per student rate, could be in our same population, same schools?
If they had the same characteristics of English learners, socioeconomically disadvantaged. I think what you're saying, though, Rob, is by the nature of the school district and the area, it perhaps might be different. If you'd like, I could bring back specifically what those criteria are for the similar schools.
I'm very interested in that.
It's a frustrating calculation, and I apologize if I anyway implemented that or implied that it doesn't matter what our similar schools ranking is.
well, I think you just said that there were differences and the rankings
sounds
maybe
like
has
it's
some
bogus.
nuances that
Yeah,
are
if
different.
it is, then I'd love to know that too, yeah.
Right.
I can bring back.
So any insight, I know that this is all new with switching to Common Core, and we know that we're going to have different assessments. Any insight on what's going to happen with these kinds of adequately yearly progress, and how are those going to be calculated based upon the new Smarter Balance assessments? And we have no idea at this point
Nothing.
where that's coming. Okay.
Nothing.
Where that's going. So this might be truly, we're not looking at any of this kind of similar data in 2 years' time.
Exactly. We know that the assessments will change. We know that the California Standards Test will end this next spring in 2014 in April or May when we administer the test. And we know that starting next school year, we will have the Smarter Balanced assessments. We will have a yearly test at the end of the year, and we will have interim assessments using the online system and performance-based assessments that we've talked about before, where students actually interact with each other, and that's graded and calculated into the rubric, and then they have a performance task on their own individually. Other than that, we have absolutely no idea what the system will be for evaluating schools.
So we don't know if they'll use the same thing or if it'll fit into the No Child Left Behind, because we still have those federal requirements, right?
It will have to
Adequate
fit
yearly
into No
progress.
Child Left Behind.
So they'll just have to figure out different benchmarks So it won't be leveled proficient in this, it'll be some other proficient in something else. Just curious.
Well, the No Child Left Behind legislation requires that we look at specific benchmarks. We look at specific metrics. So those won't remain, but the assessments that we use to attain scores for those metrics are what will change.
Right.
So the KC, for example, is not going away. The CMA and the CAPAs, which are the modified assessments for special education students, moderately and severely impacted students, are not going away. The CST for science is not going away because the Common Core assessments for science have not yet been developed.
So the Common Core assessments, the Smarter Balance, will be done, and they will then fit into whatever kind of...
Where the CSTs fit.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
On the federal side.
Right.
On the state side, we don't know what that's going to look like, and if the API is going to continue.
Elizabeth, this information has been shared with staff at all the different sites, and I know that teachers work very hard. What was their reaction to this, knowing that it's a week long of a test and it's a serious issue, but it is simply one snapshot of a child's academic career at one point in time. So what was the reaction of site administrators and staffs when they got this information?
Any of the principals want to answer that?
I mean, did they want to just pull their hair out? Did they want to just run screaming to the...
She doesn't go around.
No.
Hi, Joy Dardanelle, principal at Fair Longview.
Welcome.
And you know, it was really interesting. We had this great opportunity that was mentioned earlier on Tuesday when we were able to sit down and really look at data all together as a district and at school sites. And Kate was there too with the Fair Longview team, which we really appreciate. And when I went over the data at that meeting with the teachers, there were some questions, and we really talked about what trends are. Talked about, we're looking at trends, not necessarily small dips and things like that. What are things that we know? And then one of the questions we talked about was, what is really important? What do we really, really want students to know? What do we really want students to learn about? We talked about our strategic standards that we pulled out for this year that we're focusing on, which focuses on critical thinking and what are the things that we're doing now? What are the ways that we're seeing that already changing in our classrooms? Because this is a piece of data, and I really trust that the teachers do know their students very well and the ways that we're learning, and that we look at this as one piece of data about student learning, but there's a lot of other types of data that we can gather. That's part of the reason why I really appreciate how Dr. Rorick has brought in instructional rounds, because it allows us to look at other aspects of student learning aside from just numbers, but truly what's happening at a seat with a child, with a piece of paper, looking at the teacher and thinking. And being able to look at that moment of student learning, to me, is what I'm trying to focus on with my staff. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. It was an eye-opener. I have a question regarding the similar schools ranking. Wondering, are the similar schools that we're ranked with, is that available? Can we see the
Yes.
list of those schools and where they're located? And are there any in our community or in our near community?
No, there are none in our county that I located.
Okay.
So the way that you would, if you wanted to research it, you would go onto the DataQuest California Department of Education website, and you would call up the data for the Adequate Yearly Progress report and the API report, and you would go to the screen that talks about the results for the school, and it has the similar schools ranking and the statewide ranking, and then there's a color-coded indicator, like not an asterisk, but an indicator below the school that you click on, and it takes you to those 100 similar schools, and it shows you where the school ranks in those 1 to 100 schools that it's calculated with.
So we could find some 10s out there that are similar and go
We
for a
can
visit.
find some 10s.
Maybe go for a visit. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth.
You're welcome.
It brings us to item 11C, receive the results of EMC research voter survey. Yeah, another PowerPoint. Tony, do you want to introduce it?
Yes, happy to.
So on August 15th, at the last governing board meeting, the trustees approved a consulting contract with EMC Research to conduct a survey of voters. The purpose was to gauge potential voter support for a renewal of Measure E parcel tax. Tonight we have representatives from EMC here tonight to provide an overview of those polling results.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Alex Evans with EMC Research, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and to continue to work with your school district. With me tonight as well are Sarah and Amanda from TVWB, and at the end of this presentation, Sarah is going to talk you through some of the next steps. So we recently completed a telephone interview of 400 likely June 2014 voters. The margin of error for the survey is plus or minus 4. We did a split sample. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to that item. The interviewing was completed August 26th through 29th, so just a couple weeks ago. And where we have comparable data, we've done surveys for you back in 2012, 2009, and 2005, and in some places we'll be able to compare the results. So some of the key findings, optimism is on the rise and people feel the schools are going in the right direction, which is good news. We're also going to show you that there is a little bit of a risk here of being kind of victims of our own success. We're hoping to avoid that, but there's a little bit of a risk around that. Perceptions of the need for funding has declined since the successful measure, so that's kind of the risk there, if you will. The partial tax renewal measure is at just 2/3, so partial taxes require a 2/3 vote, unlike a school bond. With a likely vote ceiling of around 70%. So that's something we've always known about working here on the coast side, is that there's not a lot of margin for error for passing tax measures. Preserving core academic programs and qualified teachers are the top priorities. So a measure that ensures quality schools with top-notch academics and experienced teachers along with strong accountability components and no tax increase has the best prospect of passing. I'm going to show you some of the results that lead to these conclusions. So you see here just in general about how people feel about the coast side, not specifically schools, but a big improvement in optimism. So 59% now think things are going in the right direction compared to 23% who think things are seriously off on the wrong track. And 3/4 believe the economy is getting better. 27% strongly agree with that. So you can see an optimism kind of growing here on this measure as well. The direction of the local schools, that downturn there at the end is actually good news. The red line went down. The positive right direction number has gone up. So people are more optimistic about the schools, but you can see compared to everything in general, people aren't quite as optimistic about schools as they are about everything in general. But a majority believe the district is doing a good job. So 52% give you a positive rating overall, which when you combine the excellent or good. On the negative side, 37% an only fair or poor rating. The quality of teachers scores the highest, with 60% giving teachers a positive rating. Quality of education overall, 50% to 39%. The governing board, 28% versus 39%. You know that governing boards in general typically don't do as well, right? You like your congressman, but not Congress. You might like your board member, but not the board as a whole quite so much. Although 2% did give you an excellent rating. Financial management, 20. We may have talked to either you or your family. Financial management, you're seeing big don't knows there as well on the governing board and on financial management. But we do need to think about whether or not there's a story to tell there that might help those scores. Looking at parents specifically, you see better numbers for the district in general, 68 to 31. The teachers, 78 to 17. Quality of education, 70 to 29. So everything gets better when you look at parents, and that's an important indication. So the people who are most familiar with what you're doing are the people who are giving you the best ratings. Of course, on election day, it's not just parents who get the vote. The district's ratings have improved a bit. So back in September of '05, you were actually net negative, 41 positive to 49 negative. Today, you're a net positive, 51 to 37, so that's good. Let's see, I'm not going to take you through all of these. Trusting the Cabrillo School District to manage tax dollars, 56% positive rating, 34% negative rating. Hasn't changed a whole lot over time. 56% is a good positive rating, 34%. When you're thinking about a tax measure, you're always thinking about that 2/3 threshold. So the 34% negative, again, puts you kind of right there on the bubble. It's crucial to have high-quality local public schools, even if it means raising taxes. So we asked this question, even though specifically in this case you're not talking about raising taxes, because it's a way of measuring tax aversion. But you see actually good numbers here. 51% strongly agree with that, 25% somewhat agree, so 76% agree. Taxes are already high enough. I would never vote for a tax increase, no matter how it might be used. You see more disagreement there. 64% disagree with that, 32% agree. So again, kind of right there on the margin. Awareness of the district's need for money has declined, but remains above 2/3. So again, here's a case where you may be suffering a bit from your success. There's the decline in the great need from 59% back in February 12 to today at 47%, but you're still above the 2/3 threshold there. You have 70% saying there's a great or some need. So if you think about that in terms of needing to pass a tax measure, what you don't want to be in is a situation where you're explaining the need and then why this is the answer to it. If you have better than 2/3 or better than what you need on the need question, then you're simply in a position of saying, we have the need, here's how we satisfy that need. So you always want to be above the threshold for passage on the need question. So when we do these polls, what we need to do is we need to come up with what we think the 75 words might be that you would put on the ballot, because you literally get to write a ballot question of 75 words and put that before the voters. It's not the only thing that they will see, but it is the one thing we're fairly confident that they will all see if they're going to vote. We try to write a question that is a fair representation of what you might do, but we also recognize that part of the reason for doing the poll is to design a question that you would put forward. We're pretty happy with how this performed. We would, of course, like it to do a little bit better. And this is also where we did a split sample. And 5 and 8 years may not seem like a dramatic difference in time, but the history on the coast and with tax measures has not been great. So we thought we needed to be very conservative and look at the time frame that you'd used in the past, which is 5 years, and then maybe going a little bit longer and seeing if there was much difference between there. On this question, not a lot of difference. It's 1 point either way from the combined, but you'll see, kind of overall, you're right at that 2/3 on the yes side, so there's not a lot of margin for error. The 2009 initial vote, you were at 68% for $175. So for 2013, for a renewal of $150, when you combine the 5 and the 8 years, you're right at 66%. So you're within the margin of error of where you were last time. We really would rather you would be within the margin of error on the other side of 68. These next couple charts show you basically crosstabs where you are within different populations. The size of the bubble also represents the size of that group. So the parent group is the little planet up there on the far left. 75% of current parents support the parcel tax. If you're not a current parent, of course, that's a much larger population, 64%. If you ever were a parent, 69%. If you never were a parent, 64%. You see in that case the size of the two planets about the same. You can see on the far right there, the brown bubbles, what you think of the performance of the district does have a big impact. People who rate the district positively, 80% would support the parcel tax. People who rate the district negatively, 49% would support the district, would support the parcel tax. And by party, absentee voters, and then how frequently you vote. So what we see here is the less frequent voters, people who aren't permanent absentees, that's what a PAV is, are the people who are most supportive. So it's important that when you do go to the ballot, that you get a good turnout among the less frequent voters. Looking at it by community, Half Moon Bay, the city is the largest community, as you well know. That's where support is the lowest at 62%.
Can you go back, please?
Yes. So next we want to look at, what are the programs that voters would be most supportive of, and those are the types of things that you'd want to be sure that are included in a parcel tax, of course, assuming that they're consistent with what you really want to do. And also, you can look at these types of questions to determine what should be in the ballot question specifically as well, right? In 75 words, you can't completely explain what a parcel tax would be. You want to be honest and open and transparent about what it's going to be, but you also want to make sure that you're including things in there that voters understand and will respond to. So preserve strong academic reading, writing, math, and science programs gets the highest rating. 73% gave that a 7 on a scale of 1 to 7. And the ballot question that we had drafted included language that was pretty close to that. Retaining qualified teachers also does really well, 67%. Then you see a pretty significant drop-off. These are things that are still doing well, and when you add in the 5 and 6 scores, you're still doing above 2/3. Maintaining updated classroom technology, teacher training, programs to keep struggling students on the right track, college and career counseling for middle and high school students. So these are all programs that the community thinks are very important, but again, you see the drop-off from the top 2. Reading and writing specialists, 37%, 78% overall. Keeping all the district schools open, 46% gave that a 7, so you get a little bit more intensity on that question. Smaller class sizes, remember, we're talking to all voters in the district, not just parents. There might be some differences between parents and non-parents, but again, the non-current parents are the majority of the voters, and those are people we need to be sure that we're responding to. Next, what we want to understand is that kind of tells us where we start an election process, if you will. Next, we want to know, well, what happens if people start saying, here's why you should vote for it, and here's why maybe you should vote against it, because that's going to happen, and we need to understand what effect that might have on the election. So the strongest message is strong schools equals a strong community, so it's a good, strong message. 55% gave that a 7. An additional 29% gave that a 5 or 6. Half Moon Bay High School prepares students for colleges was the next strongest message. Hands-on innovation, science curriculum. These are kind of the abbreviated question wording. Retaining teachers, providing ongoing training. So what you would like is when this gets handed over to a campaign, the messages you would like to see them put forward are the ones that test the best. And again, the one that tests the best, strong schools equals strong community, preparing kids for college. Hands-on innovation, science curriculum also does really well.
Alex, if I may, I think there possibly is another reason against voting for it that I'm hearing, and that is people are confusing the bond measure and what it's providing for our school district, and they're feeling as though the two are the same thing, and they're confused over that. And I'm wondering if that was something that your analysis examined or was considered.
We tested as a negative message. So let me come back to your question, because I think it's addressed partially on another slide. This is the next slide. So that one of the things we're testing kind of all of these different messages to see which are the strongest one. These are, again, things that the community seems to value, but maybe not quite as strong as the top two messages. So after we've given them the positive reasons to vote for it, we ask them now, how would you vote? So is this information going to move people? Looking at the 5-year and the 8-year, you see better movement on the 5-year going from 65 to 74. The 8-year sample improves from 67 to 71, but the 5-year, again, you get more positive movement and you end up at a higher number. So on the negative side, so what might someone who's a critic of the measure say? And the strongest argument against it is we're already paying other taxes and bonds, enough is enough, which isn't explaining the difference between the two, but that is a risk that on the critic side, they don't really necessarily need to explain it. They just can say, we just did this, we just did that, enough is enough. And that is the strongest message, and 45% say that they find that compelling. If the district managed money better, they wouldn't need a tax increase. See, at 33% say that would be a compelling message. Not the right time, people need to keep their money in their pockets. And then Prop 30 passed, schools don't need any more money. I know that's something a lot of districts are concerned about, and 32% say that is a reason to, that would be a compelling reason to argue. That would be a compelling reason to vote against the measure. So after they've heard positive and negative information, again, you see the split sample results here, and the 5-year measure does a little bit better. It holds up a little bit better at 70%, while after negative messages, the 8-year measure drops to 68%. One piece of good news is you have historically actually done a little bit better than your polling on your on election day than your polling has shown, particularly on parcel taxes. It hasn't always gone from not winning to winning, but the direction has generally been in the right direction. So the fact that you are right at about the 2/3 where you start, that you end up above 2/3 in the end, is encouraging. But we do believe strongly that in this community with these numbers, the only way a measure like this can be successful is if a community runs a campaign in favor of the measure. This is not, you're not yet in a position where because you have the measure in place and because you're only asking to continue it, and even at 8 years being fairly conservative, you're not yet in a position where you can assume that that's going to pass. You're going to have to run, like our campaign will have to be run in favor of the measure. It's reasonably comparable to what's been done in the past to be successful. This is where I give it to. Sure. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, and I'm going to stick around and answer questions if you have them as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Sarah Stern-Benoit with TBWB Strategies, and I'm glad to be here again tonight to present what we think is really good news. We believe that the district, our recommendation would certainly be to move ahead with plans to prepare to place a parcel tax renewal measure on the ballot. The results in this poll are remarkably similar to what they were with the Measure E survey before the district placed that measure on the ballot. So we think this looks very similar, and it's going to take the same amount of communication and effort on both the part of the district in an informational way, as well as that volunteer campaign committee that would do the work that the district can't do in asking people to vote in favor of the measure. So both of those components are going to be important in terms of moving ahead. The next step really is for the board to decide if they want to continue to place an emphasis and an effort on moving forward with placing this measure on the ballot. And in order to do that, what we recommend, as I mentioned, is that the district has the opportunity to really inform its community before placing the measure on the ballot. So you have some quantitative data here from your voter survey, but what we encourage you to do in working with us is to go out and inform the community and get their feedback and some more qualitative information about how people, both in your internal community, are feeling about the parcel tax measure and renewing it, in addition to the external community, opinion shapers in the community, and how they're feeling about the parcel tax measure as well. And with that information, you'll have the ability to really put together that resolution and ballot measure and ballot language that would that you would all vote whether or not to place on the ballot. It'll help to inform that. And so it also give you the information you need to feel reasonably confident about placing this measure on the ballot. So just wanted to present kind of that as the next step for you. You have a little bit of time here before the board needs to act. The deadline to place the measure on the ballot is March 7th. So having your board meeting before then to discuss the resolution and take a vote is important. So once the board does act and vote, at that point it's really in the community's hands instead of in your hands. So taking advantage of this time period before then really to inform your community, we think is important. There's a lot of information in here that we think is going to be helpful to you in that effort. There's a lot of responsive people that don't know enough about the district in order to formulate an opinion. And we think that that will be helpful for you to be able to provide them with that information and answer any questions that they might have.
We're done with the slides. Thank you, Sarah. Are there any questions from the board members?
What's the mechanism of communication we're proposing, or is that to be sorted out?
We're talking about informal meetings with different PTOs and parent groups, informal one-on-one meetings with community leaders.
And potentially getting information out to voters at large, either through some type of informational handout or potentially something that could be mailed to voter households. So just a way of informing your community about what you're thinking about doing, giving them sort of the heads up about it so that they have the opportunity to ask you the questions that they might have about it.
We were talking about it maybe even a little further survey kind of thing as part of that, isn't that?
Yes.
You say another phone survey?
Not another phone survey, but if we sent something out to parents, have a survey kind of thing attached that we could then use as some of the results as well.
Mail back?
We could maybe do a Survey Monkey, or we haven't talked about the details of that.
Either way.
Was there, I know you said everything kind of folds similarly. It's 5 years, 4 years down the road, whatever. Was there anything, I didn't catch anything, but was there something that we should, maybe that perspective has changed on in general in terms of need in the district?
That, I think, is the major shift that we saw in this survey, is that there, as Alex, I think, put it very well, victims of your own success, and that you have been successful with a parcel tax measure, you've been successful with the bond measure, and through both of those efforts, you did a lot of communicating about the school district. So I think people do feel like education is going in the right direction, and that's good news, but it also may lead them to believe that things are good, and therefore maybe you don't need money like you did before. So the district is being very conservative. You're not asking for an increase in funding. You're simply asking to renew funds that are going to very critical academic programs and services that you provide to your students. And I think it's going to take an explanation to the community about that in order for them to understand why this measure would be needed.
Right.
At first glance, they think things are okay. After they hear why you need the funds, they believe that it's important to renew the measure. So I think that's the opportunity really that the district has in going out to the community and informing them.
Sort of help them visualize that money being gone and what the hole that would make.
And what we're seeing is really not visualizing the hole that would make, but this is the good work that this money is doing in our school district, and we need to keep that going. That's really actually what we're seeing voters responding to, instead of kind of the threat of cuts, which is also one slight difference, I think, from what we saw before. I think people feel that, again, things are better, So it's keeping them good, keeping things
Right, I mean,
going in the right direction.
Because on one side, it's saying, well, there isn't as much need, and so maybe we don't need to do this, but even if we were at full funding, I would still see great value as a parent in having additional funds available to, for all the same reasons, not backfilling gaps in funding, but overall improvement. I mean, it's clear that districts that have twice as much funding per student do a little better.
Right. And it's, I think that is part of being an insider in the school community, and those folks in your community that do not have as much knowledge about the school district. Exactly. Yeah. So it does take some time to inform them and have these kinds of conversations, and you do have that time before March. It's not a ton of time, but it's definitely, in a community of this size, enough time to get out to your real key stakeholders and help them to understand that.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I tend to concur. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's all yours. Go.
I concur with your findings, and over the last couple weeks, I've taken my own informal questioning amongst the community, and after these people who looked at this giant guy asking strange questions and realized I wasn't, some weirdo, but somebody deeply concerned with education and a board member, I said, what do you think about this parcel tax? And I heard the same thing. What's it for? What's it for? What's it for? What's it for? Those were the taglines. So
I'd say, one, I somewhat, relative to that conversation you were just having about sort of the perception of maybe things are getting better, I was expecting a bit of a dip maybe in some of this. I was actually very pleased to see, with some statistical relevance, we're pretty much the same where we were before. So there's still that will and understanding and desire to support the schools and the community and the children. So I was very pleased with that outcome of it. Two, I know from the last effort, the community-based effort to run this campaign and pass it, I know we have the capabilities, and the good part is we have the experience and folks out there who helped be part of the process before. We need to pull more people in. And I think the last thing is that despite improvements, our economic model for being funded by the state is still incredibly unstable, and it is incumbent upon us as a community to stabilize it. And this is really one of the major ways that the most significant way we can do it. The board's always talking about others, and we would be selling our community short if we did not pass an extension of the parcel tax. So that would be my comments.
Any further comments? Okay, appreciate you guys coming, and
Thank you.
Thank you. It moves us on to communications. Item 12A, board members. Any particular side want to start?
I've spoken plenty, I have nothing, so I'll pass it to Mike.
I'll start here. Have the opportunity to visit the back-to-school nights at Cunha and at the high school, and there seemed to be a lot of enthusiasm, and especially on the part of the site leaders, and the kids already at the sites, and it's just good to see school back in session. It's been kind of quiet, it seems like, on the campuses during the week, and that's it.
I had the privilege of volunteering at Cunha School for their registration day, and I want to have a hats off to the office staff at Cunha School, Karen Borges and Myra Rodriguez. If you need to be organized or efficient, those are the ladies to see. Lala, would you agree? Their registration was fantastic, and those are the types of people that we want to retain, maintain, encourage, and absolutely a fabulous 6th, 7th, and 8th grade registration day. I was also on Hatch's campus for the first day of school, and I sort of miss it. Lots of kids, Mr. Ward, on your campus. Yeah, parking was a hard thing to do. But anyway.
We have a plan for that.
we have a plan for the parking?
Yes, we do.
Last Saturday evening, I was having a dinner with some friends in Cafe Luna, the outdoor cafe, and Miss Baxter, the president of Jenna Baxter of the Future Farmers of America, and her friend came strolling in with their 2 goats, sporting the blue coats, and you know, it was really wonderful. We spoke for a little while. At the end, I introduced myself, you know, as a trustee. But prior to that, I asked her how she liked the program and her instructor, and she was glowing and just so excited about the opportunities that they have. And it was really exciting to see her and the rest of the team here tonight. Last week, Dr. Shuck and I spoke at an event, the Brews and Views event, which was a premiere of a film on our coast called First Generation, which was a documentary about high school students, first generation in their families trying to get to college. And it was a remarkable film, and a number of people came and participated in the evening. And Dr. Shuck and I answered questions, entertained questions, and it was really a pleasure to work alongside her. And the folks that came, obviously very passionate about education, and some of them parents, some of them not. I also had the pleasure of attending the back to school night at Hatch, and there were so many parts of that were just truly amazing to me. But once again, the applause and the love that was shared for Mr. Ward when his position was announced by Dr. Rourke, I was deeply moved by that, and as I was by the number of different agencies and groups of people that are participating in that school and working to make that school, you know, just an amazing place for our young children.
So I wanted to thank Sarah and all who've left for the summary of the survey results. I agree with Rob. I think it was very affirming that we were at the same place in terms of the numbers, and I'm very hopeful that our community can again rise to that challenge of continuing to provide local stable funding. So there's definitely work to be done in the next year, but I tell people it's not about the cuts, but I can't imagine not having the 1.7 million that Measure E has given us, and I don't even know where we would begin to cut. And that gives me the motivation to go out and try and work with and find those community members and everyone to help us do that so that we can have that stable local funding that we've been lucky enough to have from our community for the last several years. So as part of that, discussing with some of the PTO heads of all the different schools, Kate hosted a lovely coffee this morning for the PTO leads at all the different schools, and we were able to tell them about the survey results and talk to them about the potential of coming in and speaking to some of the other parent leaders. So that's very exciting. It was a wonderful event. I appreciate you hosting it and coming up with it. We also gave them an update on LCFF and how we were able successfully last year to include the hold harmless provision in the language due to Tony and YL's hard work, as well as our local representatives assisting, so that we did not have to face $1 million cut this year. Of course, we still don't know yet what LCFF will do for this coming year, and we'll find out in April, I believe it is. We also updated them on the strategic planning process, which Kate and I have also been attending the committee meetings, and Tony will provide more details with. But I think it's a really exciting time this fall to really get a lot of input from our community and feedback on how our whole community, from students to teachers to staff to parents to community members, feel about the district and where it should be going, and help us to provide us with that direction. So I think it's a really exciting time, and I'm looking forward to that. So that's all.
So principals, if your PTO president comes to you, it's because Freya said to.
She already did. Oh. Tracy did? She's like, where's my invitation?
Yeah.
And Brenda, welcome.
So we started off our Spirit year with our Welcome Back Assembly. Our themes for this year are the everyday heroes. So we have doctors for freshmen, firefighters for the sophomores, juniors are policemen, and seniors are military. This year we have a homecoming court of 16. We have 8 females and 8 males because we had students not happy with our decision or our initial homecoming court that we had. So we decided to add 3 females and 3 males to the court. Events that are coming up are the SAT for the seniors on October 4th, and our leadership car wash that will be split the funds between the junior class and the leadership class. And we have the artichoke run for cross country. And we have challenge day coming up on September 23rd, and everyone's really excited about that this year. They've made it really big. We had team leaders go into our history classes and show us the video and explain their views on it and share their experiences. So we have a lot of freshmen and juniors excited for that.
Okay. Are more people going to do that this year? Do we have more
If you would like to volunteer, we need more adults.
We
The
need
more
more
adults,
adults.
youth, the more students we can have participate. Monday, the 23rd.
That's a Monday.
Week from Monday.
It's an all-day affair.
So we have a new club, Bible club that has been started, and then we have GSA coming back this year. And overall, leadership's really happy with Miss Rocha, because it's our first year with her, and we're all really happy with what she's doing with us.
Okay. And will you in the future have reports from some of the other schools
Yes.
as well? Okay, great. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Superintendent?
Yes, some familiar themes here. I was just going to speak a little bit about Challenge Day 2, and that's been well covered. As of this afternoon, I understand that an additional 10 adult volunteers are needed. So if you have the time, from 7:30 to 3:30 is what I understand the time commitment is on the 23rd. Back to school nights, I had the pleasure of attending all the events this year with the one exception of Kings Mountain. Conflicting time with Hatch and with events there, it was important for me to attend Hatch's back to school night this year. Amazing attendance at all of them, parent involvement, parent groups, CEF, everyone there sharing all the wonderful things going on in the district, and it just, set a tone for just an incredible school year coming up. Strategic plan update. We have determined the 2 data collection weeks. The first is the week of September 23rd. That's just right around the corner, as we know, a week from Monday, as we just heard. And the second is October 21st. Data will be collected through one-on-one interviews, focus groups. There'll be a special meeting of teachers, classified staff, and site administrators. And the tool that will be used at this one meeting is the school capacity profile. There will also be 2 community forums and an online survey in both English and Spanish that will be available to every member in the community to access. Community forums are scheduled for Thursday, September 26th and Wednesday, October 23rd. Both forums will be held at the high school in the multi-use room, and both start at 6 o'clock. The online survey will open on the first day of data collection, September 23rd, and will close on October 25th. We have flyers, press releases ready to go, announcing those things as well. And it's just going to be an amazing couple of weeks collecting data just from a variety of stakeholders. We talked about the obvious ones, teachers, classified staff, parents, but there's also, social service agencies, and we're also looking at parents of kids who've opted out for options other than Cabrillo Unified. We're looking at the business community. We're looking at government agencies, just a variety of stakeholders across the district to give us input on developing our strategic goals. And then finally, as Dr. Shuck alluded to earlier, on Tuesday of this week, we held instructional rounds training for all the schools in the district. Trustee Livingston was present as well and was an active participant, rolling up her sleeve and getting into that Fairlawn View 4th and 5th grade data. Great conversations going on, and schools now are just in the process of processing the information that they learned and on the potential of rounds as a tool to assist them in their strategic improvement efforts. So that's all for this evening.
Great. Thank you, Tony. That brings us to item 13, consent items. Do I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Michael. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Consent items approved 5-0 plus 1. Brings us to the action items. Item 14A, adopt resolution number 26, several resolutions, 26-13, 27-13, 28-13, 29-13, and 30-13 for employees assigned on the basis of an education code provision. John?
Thank you. Presented to the governing board this evening for approval are 5 resolutions that permit current staff to teach subjects as identified. These are annual resolutions that are presented to the governing board. They are required and need to be approved and submitted to the San Mateo County Office of Ed, in particular for credential audits that come up. I'm just very quickly going to go through the 5 resolutions. Resolution 2613 is Ed Code 44263, assignment to teach a single subject class. And this is a teacher at the high school who has completed 18 semester units of coursework, thus authorizing her to teach art at Half Moon Bay High School. Resolution 27-13 is an Ed Code provision 44258.3, authorizing the teaching of a departmentalized class. And this is a teacher at Half Moon Bay High School to teach basic algebra within the special education program. Our third resolution is 28-13, and this is a authorization that authorizes 3 of our teachers who currently hold multiple subject credentials to teach within departmentalized classes as long as they have completed 12 semester units. And you can see within the resolution we have 2 teachers at Cunha, 1 teaching art, 1 teaching physical education, and then we also have a teacher at Fairlawn View and El Granada teaching physical education. Our fourth resolution, 2913, permits 3 of our teachers to teach within an elective area. We have 2 teachers at Cunha, 1 teaching shop, 1 teaching home economics, and finally a teacher at Half Moon Bay High School that this resolution permits for him to teach animation. And our final resolution presented to the governing board is resolution 30-13. This authorizes a district employee who has a valid license from the Speech and Language Pathology Board to provide services for speech therapy to students in our district. So again, these are annual resolutions that are presented to the governing board for approval.
Great, thank you. Do we need to approve them each separately then?
Pardon?
Do we need to approve them each separately?
I believe they're presented in bulk.
So that we can vote on all of them at once?
I believe, unless Dr. Warwick would have a different belief, they're presented in bulk. And honestly, I think some years we've presented them individually and some years in bulk, but this evening they're presented in bulk.
Okay.
So I believe you can present as approve as.
The trustees can vote aye or nay for all of them in bulk, and if they wanted to differentiate between any of them, they would need to indicate so. For example, if 4 were okay with them, but 1 wasn't, then they would differentiate.
And the roll call votes?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So do I have a motion to approve all 5 resolutions?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, starting on this side.
Aye.
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 Approved 5 plus 1 to 0. Moves us to item 14B, adopt resolution number 31-13 to designate authorized representatives of Cabrillo Unified School District as signatories effective September 13th, 2013.
As the trustees are well aware, we've had a few key leadership changes in the district office, and as such, we need to approve certain individuals to now have authority as signatories to conduct business on the district's behalf.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adopt?
A motion.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, it's a roll call, sorry. Starting with you, Kirk.
Aye.
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 Approved 5 plus 1 to 0. That brings us to item 14C, adopt board district goals for the 2013-14 school year.
Yes, and as the trustees will recall, this item was a discussion item at the August regular board meeting. A few amendments were suggested. Those have been included into the plans right here. In addition, there is a specific goal for Pillar Cetos and to follow the Department of Education's process to become a California model continuation high school using the quality indicators. And that document, not in my packet.
Where is that written?
It's
It's
goal
number
number
7
2.
under goal number 2.
Yeah.
It's not second step.
Yeah, that's something else.
Go to goal number 2.
I'll- I'll-
You're on goal number 7.
Goal 7,
Yeah.
It's on page 119 of the board
Goal 2.
packet.
number 7, there it is.
There it is.
Yeah, goal 2.7,
Okay.
2.7.
And we also changed the
Yes,
benchmarks for
for
the
the- for the
health and safety,
anti-bullying.
for the implementation of the Second Steps pilot program, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Which I appreciate comments from.
Those are the two.
So do I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
Let's approve it. This is a good plan, huh?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Approved 5 plus 1 to 0. That brings us to item 14D. Approve responses to San Mateo County Jury Report Capital Appreciation Bonds, ticking time bombs. Glad to see that we didn't have any of these.
No, we have not engaged in the issuance of any capital appreciation bonds. However, last year, the San Mateo County Grand Jury investigated districts in the county, and there are several, that have issued capital appreciation bonds, and this became really a hot topic a couple of years ago in Southern California when there were a couple of districts that had issued these bonds, large dollar amounts, and they're really not a good vehicle for the public. The capital appreciation bonds very quickly typically have a 40-year repay rate, but typically you're only paying back on them on the back 25 years. So they're collecting interest for 15 years, and districts issue those because of the inability to issue regular general obligation bonds because of your housing values just won't support that. And so you put off the repayment of debt into the future, and that calculates out and allows you to stay within your specific dollar amount for $100,000 of assessed value. So while it works in terms of numbers and it keeps a commitment to your community that you won't be above $100 or $75 or whatever your language is, the fact is that you're paying back 3, 4, 5 times in principal, in payments of what the original principal is. And for the districts, it gives dollars in hand immediately. So they're not a good strategy by any means for the community. Unfortunately, Cabrillo has not engaged in the issuance of any of those in the past, nor do we have any plans to do so. However, there were certain issues or recommendations that every school district in the county must respond to the grand jury, and enclosed in here is the district's response on page 136 of the packet.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Do I have a motion to approve the responses?
I'll move to approve. I thought those responses were sound and accurate. Thank you.
Do we have a second? Do we have any comments or discussion?
No, I'm glad we can say that.
We don't have any.
We're not doing anything silly like that. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Approved 5 plus 1. 0. Brings us to item 15, discussion items. We have none. Item 16, future board agenda items. We will have a summer school report. Is that the next meeting? Okay, great. Unaudited actuals, also the next October meeting. Statement of assurances for textbooks and instructional materials. Is that October as well? Policy maintenance updates are, we get them when they come, right?
Can I ask for a class size update? How are we doing on that? Could that be just, maybe a handout of where are we in transitional Ks at the site and first grades? I'd like to know class size, because that's wound up with Measure E, that it was to keep class size lower. So that would be good information for us to have as we move forward with maybe a renewal as well.
Okay.
That we've done something about that.
Great, and so future events, we have September 16th and 17th, Silicon Valley Foundation Community Core State Standard Math Grant Kickoff at the high school. So that's coming up soon.
That's on Monday and Tuesday, and actually the first event is a gap analysis, so we're looking at data, spending the day together looking at data and identifying trends that we want to address in our math departments at CUNA and the high school.
CUNA and the high school only.
That's what the grant was for. It was for the secondary schools. However, Elizabeth, never being happy that we can't provide something for everyone, asked if the organization would also, the Silicon Valley Math Initiative would also provide services to our elementary schools. And next week we're also having, which is on Freya's President McCammond's list, is Math Institute for our 4th and 5th grade teachers on new Common Core math standards.
September 17th through 19th at Fairlawn View. Okay. Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. And September 19th, there'll be an ELAC parent meeting at Cunha Intermediate School. Is that the district ELAC one, or is that Cunha's?
That's Cunha's.
Oh, okay. September 23rd, our Los Listos preschool class begins. Is it one or two classes?
Just one.
Just one.
Where is Los Listos located now?
It's at Hatch in
Still at Hatch?
C6.
And September 23rd is Challenge Day. It's been mentioned already before at the high school, and hopefully people have time or energy can help out with that. September 23rd is also the ELAC parent meeting at Fairlawn View. September 24th, ELAC parent meeting at Hatch. September 27th is the ELAC parent meeting at El Granada. October 1st is the Chamber Education Committee at the district office at 4 p.m.
And I'm the rep for that.
You're doing that, okay.
And she brought ice cream to the last meeting. Now you've set a high bar.
Yeah, what do you bring to this one?
It was the hottest day we had of the year, so I thought it was appropriate to bring ice cream.
So October 7th to 11th is the Outdoor Education Week for 6th grade students at Cunha. October 7th to 11th is also parent-teacher conferences at the elementary schools. And we'll have our book fair that weekend as well, at Fairlawn View. And October 10th is our next regular governing board meeting at 7 p.m. So we do not have to return to closed session. It's always good. Okay, so motion to adjourn? Yeah,
So moved.
good. Second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5+1. Thank you, everyone, for coming.